The Sherman's 76mm gun cracked across the frozen Belgian fields, and 1,200 yards away, a Panther tank shuddered to a halt, smoke pouring from its turret ring. Inside the American tank, Sergeant Eugene Wilkins couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. The shot, fired at a distance where German tankers believed themselves invincible, had punched straight through armor that was supposed to be impenetrable. For months, Wehrmacht crews had operated under a dangerous assumption that the Sherman's 76mm gun lacked the power to threaten their Panther tanks at combat ranges. This belief, cultivated by early war experiences and German technical assessments, would prove catastrophically wrong. What unfolded in the winter of 1944–45 wasn't just a story of technological miscalculation, but a brutal education in the gap between battlefield myth and lethal reality. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because, tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The German Panther tank represented one of the Wehrmacht's most successful responses to the crisis on the Eastern Front. When the Red Army's T-34 tanks devastated German armoured formations in 1941 and 1942, Hitler demanded a counter that could restore German superiority. The result was the Panzerkampfwagen V Panther, a medium tank that combined sloped armour, a powerful 75mm Quebec 42 litres, 70 gun, and reasonable mobility. By late 1944, the Panther had evolved from its troubled introduction at Kursk into a formidable fighting vehicle. Its frontal armour, 80mm thick and sloped at 55 degrees, provided exceptional protection against most Allied anti-tank weapons. German crews knew their tanks offered them significant advantages in long-range duels, and this knowledge bred a particular kind of battlefield confidence. That confidence wasn't entirely misplaced. Throughout 1944, German Panther crews had repeatedly demonstrated their tanks' capabilities against earlier Sherman variants. The standard M4 Sherman, armed with a 75mm gun, struggled to penetrate Panther armor except at dangerously close ranges or from favorable angles. American tankers learned quickly that engaging Panthers frontally with the 75mm gun was often suicidal. The German 75mm Quebec 42 gun, meanwhile, could penetrate a Sherman's armor from well over 2,000 yards. This imbalance created a tactical nightmare for Allied armored units, who were forced to rely on numerical superiority, infantry support, and tactical maneuver to overcome German heavy armor. For German crews, encounters with 75mm Shermans became almost routine, dangerous, certainly, but manageable if proper defensive positions were maintained. The introduction of the M4 Sherman armed with the 76mm M1 gun changed the tactical equation, but German intelligence and frontline assessments failed to fully appreciate the magnitude of this shift. The 76mm gun began reaching American armored divisions in Normandy during the summer of 1944, but its performance was initially hampered by ammunition issues. Early stocks of 76mm armor-piercing rounds used the M62 projectile, which performed disappointingly against heavy German armor. American tankers reported frustration when their new guns failed to penetrate Panthers at ranges where penetration should have been possible. These early combat reports, some of which reached German intelligence through interrogation of prisoners and captured documents, reinforced Wehrmacht assumptions that even the improved Sherman remained inferior to German heavy tanks in direct combat. What German analysts missed was the rapid American response to the ammunition problem. By late 1944, American ordnance teams had developed and fielded the M93 hypervelocity armor-piercing round, commonly known as HVAP. This tungsten-cored projectile, fired from the 76mm gun, achieved muzzle velocities approaching 3,400 feet per second. The performance characteristics were revolutionary. Against Panther frontal armor, HVAP ammunition could achieve penetration at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards under favorable conditions. More importantly, against the Panther's side armor only 40–50 mm thick, the 76mm gun with HVAP became devastatingly effective at ranges German crews considered safe. The problem was scarcity. HVAP ammunition remained in critically short supply throughout late 1944, rationed carefully to frontline units. Many American tank crews received only a handful of HVAP rounds per tank, forcing them to make every shot count. The German High Command's intelligence apparatus, already straining under the demands of a multi-front war, failed to adequately track and assess the implications of HVAP deployment. Reports of improved American anti-tank performance were noted but not systematically analyzed. The prevailing assumption within Wehrmacht circles remained that American armor relied on numerical superiority rather than technical excellence. This prejudice had roots in earlier encounters and was reinforced by German technical confidence in their own engineering. Panther crews were briefed on American capabilities, but these briefings emphasized the continued superiority of German armor in direct engagements. The psychological impact of this messaging cannot be overstated. German tankers approached encounters with Shermans, believing they possessed decisive advantages in protection and firepower, a belief that shaped their tactical decisions and risk calculations. The operational context of late 1944 further obscured the changing battlefield dynamics. As Allied forces pushed toward Germany's borders following the breakout from Normandy, German armored units found themselves increasingly engaged in defensive operations characterized by hasty withdrawals, counterattacks, and meeting engagements. The fluid nature of these battles made systematic after-action analysis difficult. When Panthers were destroyed, German commanders often attributed losses to air attack, artillery, or close-range ambushes by multiple enemy tanks, all common occurrences that fit existing assumptions about Allied tactics. The possibility that individual Shermans were achieving long-range penetrations against Panther armor wasn't immediately obvious from the chaos of retreat and counterattack. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. American armored doctrine during this period reflected hard-won lessons about engaging German heavy armor. Tank destroyer battalions, equipped with vehicles like the M10 and M36, were theoretically responsible for engaging enemy armor, while Sherman tanks provided infantry support and exploited breakthroughs. In practice, this division of labor often broke down under battlefield conditions. German tanks appeared where doctrine said they shouldn't, and Shermans frequently found themselves in direct combat with Panthers and Tigers. The arrival of 76mm armed Shermans gave American tank commanders a fighting chance in these encounters, but success required more than just better guns. It demanded tactical skill, crew coordination, and often a measure of luck. Lieutenant James Bates commanded a platoon of 76mm Shermans in the 3rd Armored Division during the advance into Belgium in September 1944. His unit had received HVAP ammunition in limited quantities, and Bates insisted on drilling his crews in ammunition selection and range estimation. He understood that HVAP's scarcity made it a precious resource, to be employed only when standard armor-piercing rounds were unlikely to achieve penetration. His gunners practiced identifying German armor at range, distinguishing Panthers from Panzer IVs based on silhouette and profile. They rehearsed engagement sequences, calculating angles and distances, planning firing positions that would maximize their advantages while minimizing exposure. Bates knew that even with HVAP, his Shermans remained vulnerable. The key was to see the enemy first, shoot first, and make the first shot count. The terrain of Belgium and eastern France in autumn 1944 favored defensive operations. Rolling hills, scattered woodlands, and numerous small villages provided German forces with abundant opportunities for ambush and defense. Panther tanks, with their superior range and frontal protection, could dominate key terrain features, forcing American units to find flanking routes or call for artillery and air support. German commanders positioned Panthers to cover approaches, crossroads, and bridges anywhere Allied armor would be channeled or forced to advance predictably. These defensive positions multiplied the Panthers' advantages, allowing small numbers of German tanks to delay much larger American formations. For Wehrmacht tankers, these engagements reinforced their confidence in their vehicles and their tactical situation. even as the broader strategic picture continued to deteriorate. The psychological dimension of tank combat in World War II deserves careful consideration. Inside an armored vehicle, crew members existed in a world of limited visibility, mechanical noise, and constant vulnerability. The knowledge that a single armor-piercing round could transform the crew compartment into a death trap created enormous stress. German Panther crews managed this stress partly through confidence in their technical superiority. They trusted their armor to protect them and their gun to destroy enemies before those enemies could respond effectively. This trust enabled aggressive tactics and steady nerves under fire. American Sherman crews, conversely, had learned to accept their vulnerability. They knew their tanks offered less protection than German heavy armor, and this knowledge fostered different tactical approaches: greater caution, heavier reliance on combined arms support, and emphasis on teamwork and maneuver. The introduction of 76mm armed Shermans with HVAP ammunition began to level this psychological battlefield, though the change was gradual and uneven. American crews with access to HVAP gained a new confidence. They knew they possessed, for the first time, a weapon that could defeat Panther armor at tactically significant ranges. This knowledge changed how they approached engagements, making them more willing to take calculated risks and less dependent on overwhelming numerical advantages. The transformation wasn't universal. Many Sherman units continued operating with 75mm guns throughout the war, and even those with 76mm guns often lacked sufficient HVAP ammunition. But where the new ammunition was available, and crews were properly trained in its employment, the tactical balance shifted measurably in favor of American armor. German tactical doctrine for Panther employment emphasized the tank's strengths in long-range combat. Panther crews were trained to engage enemy armor at maximum effective range, using their superior optics and gun performance to destroy opponents before those opponents could close to effective fighting distance. In defensive operations, Panthers would be positioned in hull-down positions on favorable terrain, with only the turret exposed, maximizing protection while maintaining fields of fire. In offensive operations, Panthers would advance with infantry support, using their armor to shield accompanying troops while engaging enemy strongpoints and armored vehicles. These tactics had proven successful against Soviet armor on the Eastern Front and continued to demonstrate effectiveness against Allied forces in the West. What these tactics didn't adequately account for was an enemy tank that could achieve lethal penetration at ranges previously considered safe. When American 76mm Shermans with HVAP ammunition began appearing in combat, German Panther crews found themselves vulnerable in situations where they had previously felt secure. A Panther positioned hull down at 1,200 yards could still be penetrated if an American gunner landed a shot on the turret face, or, even more devastatingly, if the Panther exposed its side armor during movement or positioning. The Germans' tactical confidence, built on accurate assessments of earlier American capabilities, became a liability when those capabilities improved without corresponding updates to German intelligence and training. The industrial and logistical dimensions of this technological competition reveal important contrasts between American and German approaches to armored warfare. The United States built more than 49,000 Sherman tanks during World War II, along with thousands of tank destroyers and other armored vehicles. This massive production enabled American forces to sustain operations despite heavy losses, continuously replacing destroyed vehicles and maintaining numerical superiority. German production, while technologically impressive, never approached these numbers. Panthers were sophisticated machines requiring skilled labor and increasingly scarce materials to produce. By late 1944, German industry struggled to replace combat losses, and frontline units operated perpetually under strength. This production disparity meant that even as individual German tanks maintained technical advantages, the Wehrmacht's armored force as a whole was being ground down by attrition. American ammunition production demonstrated similar advantages in scale and adaptability. When the M62 armor-piercing round proved inadequate, American industry developed, tested, and fielded the improved HVAP round in months. Although tungsten scarcity limited HVAP production throughout the war, American logistics ensured that critical supplies reached frontline units with reasonable efficiency. German ammunition development faced similar material constraints, but operated within a production and distribution system increasingly disrupted by Allied bombing and transportation interdiction. The result was that German technical innovations often failed to reach the battlefield in sufficient quantities to affect tactical outcomes. American tankers might have only a few HVAP rounds per tank, but they had them. German crews might have superior armor and guns, but they increasingly lacked fuel, spare parts, and replacements. The training disparities between American and German armored forces by late 1944 also played crucial roles in combat effectiveness. Early in the war, German panzer crews benefited from extensive training and combat experience accumulated during the victories in Poland, France, and the early Eastern Front campaigns. By 1944, however, the Wehrmacht's training system was breaking down under the pressure of mounting casualties and resource shortages. New Panther crews reaching the front often had minimal training time in their vehicles, with precious little opportunity for live-fire practice or tactical exercises. American training, while varied in quality, benefited from greater fuel availability for exercises and more systematic approaches to gunnery and crew coordination. Well-trained American crews in 76mm Shermans, armed with HVAP and supported by competent leadership, could achieve remarkable results against technically superior German armor. The specific tactical scenarios where 76mm Shermans began achieving long-range penetrations against Panthers typically shared certain characteristics. Visibility was crucial. American gunners needed clear lines of sight to their targets at extended ranges. Morning and evening light, providing good visibility without the challenging shadows of midday, often favored precise gunnery. Terrain that allowed American tanks to observe German positions from hull-down positions of their own gave Sherman crews the opportunity to take deliberate, aimed shots rather than rushed engagements. Most importantly, American crews needed the presence of mind and training to select HVAP ammunition when the situation warranted and to estimate range accurately enough to make these difficult shots count. Range estimation at 1,000 yards or more required significant skill and experience. Tank commanders and gunners used a combination of methods. Comparing the target's apparent size to known dimensions, using reticles in their optics, employing range cards prepared during defensive preparation, and developing intuitive feel through practice and previous engagements. Errors in range estimation could mean the difference between a penetrating hit and a round that fell short or sailed over the target. The Germans, with their superior optics and extensive training in long-range gunnery, had long enjoyed advantages in this crucial skill. But American crews were learning, adapting their techniques, and developing their own expertise through the brutal teacher of combat experience. The ballistic properties of the 76mm gun-firing HVAP ammunition made these long-range shots possible but not easy. At 1,200 yards, even the high-velocity HVAP round had dropped significantly from its muzzle trajectory and had lost a portion of its kinetic energy. Penetration capability decreased with range, making shot placement absolutely critical. A hit on the Panther's heavily sloped frontal armor might still fail to penetrate, even with HVAP, if the angle wasn't favorable. But a well-aimed shot at the turret face, where armor was somewhat less steeply angled, or a side shot against the Panther's thinner flank armor, could achieve devastating results. American gunners learned to take what the situation offered, aiming for vulnerable areas when possible, rather than simply shooting at the enemy's strongest protection. The German confidence in their Panthers' invulnerability to frontal attack at long range wasn't entirely unfounded given the information available to them. Against 75mm Shermans and most British tanks, Panthers were indeed nearly invulnerable frontally, at ranges beyond 1,000 yards. German training and tactical guidance reflected this reality, encouraging crews to leverage their range advantage and frontal protection. The arrival of improved American ammunition and the improved 76mm gun represented a fundamental shift in battlefield capabilities, but one that occurred gradually and wasn't immediately obvious to German intelligence analysts or frontline commanders. By the time German forces recognized the threat, American 76mm Shermans were becoming increasingly common, and the tactical situation had already begun to shift. The first documented instances of 76mm Shermans achieving penetrations against Panthers at extended ranges occurred during the Allied advance through France in August and September 1944, though these events weren't immediately recognized for their significance. Combat reports from this period describe isolated incidents where Panthers were knocked out at what German crews considered safe distances, but the chaos of rapid advance and the multiplicity of anti-tank threats on the battlefield made it difficult to determine exactly what had destroyed individual German tanks. American after-action reports mentioned successful engagements, but often lacked the detailed ballistic analysis needed to confirm penetration distances and ammunition types. The tactical revolution was happening on battlefields across Western Europe, but its full implications remained obscured by the fog of war. Sergeant Robert Chen's experience illustrated how these engagements unfolded. His 76mm Sherman was part of a reconnaissance element probing German defensive positions near the Belgian border in early September 1944. Moving cautiously along a tree-lined road, Chen's tank commander spotted a Panther positioned in a farmyard, approximately 1,100 yards distant. The German tank was oriented to cover a crossroads, its crew apparently unaware of the American presence. Chen's commander made a quick calculation. They had 4 rounds of HVAP ammunition remaining from their initial allocation of 6. The range was extreme, but the Panther presented a clear target in good afternoon light. The commander decided to take the shot rather than risk maneuvering closer and alerting the German crew. Chen carefully adjusted his aim, compensating for range and the slight crosswind. The first HVAP round struck the Panther's turret at the junction between the gun mantlet and turret face, punching through and detonating inside. The German tank erupted in flames, its crew abandoning the vehicle within seconds. For Chen and his crew, the engagement demonstrated what was possible with proper ammunition and careful gunnery. For the German survivors, if they understood what had hit them, the engagement revealed that American capabilities had evolved beyond their intelligence estimates. These individual successes began accumulating across the front, creating a pattern that should have alarmed German commanders but often went unrecognized amid the broader crisis facing Wehrmacht forces in the West. After the collapse of German defences in France and the headlong retreat toward Germany's borders, Panther battalions found themselves committed piecemeal to defensive actions, counterattacks, and rearguard operations. Communication between units was frequently disrupted, and systematic collection of tactical intelligence suffered accordingly. When Panthers were lost in combat, determining the cause often proved impossible. Air attack, artillery, and anti-tank guns all claimed victims, and distinguishing between these threats and improved American tank armament required analysis that overwhelmed German staff sections were unable to conduct systematically. The autumn battles in the Hürtgen forest and along the approaches to the Siegfried Line provided numerous opportunities for tank versus tank engagements in terrain that often negated the Panther's range advantages. Dense forest and steep terrain channeled movement along roads and clearings, forcing tanks into predictable paths and reducing engagement ranges. In these constrained environments, the differences between 75mm and 76mm Shermans mattered less, and German tactical advantages diminished. But between the forests and fortified areas lay open terrain where long-range gunnery still dominated, and here the 76mm Sherman with HVAP ammunition began demonstrating its full potential. American tank commanders learned to exploit these opportunities, positioning their vehicles to cover open approaches and waiting for German armor to reveal itself. Lieutenant Bates's platoon encountered a German armored column on an open plain south of Aachen in October 1944. His 3 76mm Shermans occupied positions along a low ridgeline, hull down and camouflaged, watching a valley below. Through his binoculars, Bates observed 4 Panthers moving in tactical formation, advancing to support a German infantry counterattack against American positions. The range was approximately 1,300 yards, near the outer limits of HVAP effectiveness, but within the theoretical penetration envelope. Bates radioed his other tank commanders, coordinating their fire. Each Sherman would target a different Panther, firing simultaneously to maximize surprise and minimize the time German crews would have to react. On Bates's signal, all 3 Shermans fired HVAP rounds. 2 Panthers immediately shuddered to a halt, smoke pouring from penetrated armor. The 3rd shot missed, and the 2 remaining German tanks began backing rapidly toward cover while traversing their turrets to locate the American positions. Bates's gunner fired again, his 2nd HVAP round catching a retreating Panther in the side armor and achieving a catastrophic kill. The surviving German tank made it to a tree line and escaped, but 3 Panthers had been destroyed in less than a minute by American tanks firing from a range where German doctrine said they should have been safe. The psychological impact on German crews witnessing such engagements was profound. Tankers who had grown accustomed to dominating the battlefield found themselves vulnerable in situations where they had previously felt secure. The realization that American tanks could penetrate Panther armor at long range undermined the confidence that had sustained German crews through increasingly desperate tactical situations. Some German after-action reports from this period note with alarm the improved American anti-tank capabilities. But these reports often struggled to explain exactly what had changed. Without systematic intelligence on American ammunition developments, German analysts sometimes attributed improved penetration to new American tank destroyers or misidentified the weapons achieving these results. The institutional knowledge that might have prompted tactical adaptations remained fragmentary and failed to influence broader Wehrmacht training and doctrine. American tactical doctrine began evolving to exploit the capabilities of 76mm armed Shermans, though this evolution occurred unevenly across different units. Some commanders aggressively sought to position their improved Shermans where they could engage German armor at range, treating them almost like mobile tank destroyers. Other units continued employing 76mm Shermans primarily in infantry support roles, using their improved anti-tank capability defensively when German armor appeared. The tank destroyer battalions, meanwhile, were receiving M36 Jackson tank destroyers armed with 90mm guns, further complicating the tactical picture. The result was a combined arms capability where German heavy armor faced multiple threats across a range of engagement distances, making defensive positioning and tactical planning increasingly difficult for Wehrmacht commanders. The scarcity of HVAP ammunition remained a critical constraint on American operations throughout late 1944. Production of tungsten-cored ammunition was limited by raw material availability, and competing demands from other weapons systems meant that 76mm HVAP was perpetually in short supply. Tank crews received HVAP rounds in small quantities, often just 3 to 6 rounds per tank, and were instructed to employ them judiciously against heavy armor at ranges where standard ammunition would be ineffective. This scarcity created interesting tactical dynamics. American tank commanders had to make real-time decisions about when to use their precious HVAP rounds and when to rely on standard armor-piercing ammunition or high-explosive shells. A target that might warrant HVAP at 1,200 yards might be engaged with standard ammunition at 800 yards, conserving the special rounds for situations where they were truly necessary. These calculations added another layer of complexity to already stressful combat situations. The German Ardennes offensive in December 1944 brought these evolving capabilities into sharp focus. Hitler's gamble aimed to split Allied armies and capture the vital port of Antwerp, and the attack spearheads included substantial numbers of Panther tanks, along with heavier Tiger IIs and various other armored vehicles. The offensive caught American forces by surprise, and the initial days saw German armored columns making significant gains against thinly held American positions. But as American reinforcements arrived and defensive lines stabilized, the tank battles that developed demonstrated how much the tactical balance had shifted since the summer. American 76mm Shermans, now present in significant numbers and supported by M36 tank destroyers, engaged German armor on more equal terms than would have been possible even 6 months earlier. During the defense of Bastogne and the subsequent counterattacks to relieve the encircled American forces, Numerous engagements pitted 76mm Shermans against Panthers in the rolling, semi-open terrain of the Ardennes. The winter weather, with its limited daylight hours and frequent snow, created challenging conditions for long-range gunnery, but when visibility permitted, American crews demonstrated their improved capabilities. Captain Edward Walsh commanded a company of 76mm Shermans that fought a running battle with German armour along the road to Bastogne in late December. His unit destroyed 7 Panthers over 3 days of combat, with several kills occurring at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards. Walsh's after-action report noted the critical importance of HVAP ammunition, which his tanks had received in above-average quantities due to their assignment to a relief column. The report also documented the improved confidence and aggressiveness of his crews, who now approached encounters with German heavy armour with determination rather than dread. The German perspective during the Ardennes offensive reveals the cumulative effect of months of tactical surprise and evolving American capabilities. Panther crews participating in the offensive had been briefed that they would face numerous enemy tanks, but their tactical guidance still emphasized their vehicles' superiority in direct combat. What they encountered was an American armored force that had learned hard lessons about fighting German heavy armor and had developed the tools and techniques to do so more effectively. The legendary German tank ace, Ernst Bachmann, fighting in the Ardennes with SS Panzer Regiment II, noted in post-war interviews that American tank gunnery had improved dramatically since Normandy. He described several encounters where American tanks engaged his Panthers at long range with unexpected accuracy and effect, forcing him to employ more cautious tactics than he had used earlier in the war. The technological arms race between German armor protection and American anti-tank capabilities illustrated broader patterns in World War II combat development. Both sides continuously adapted their equipment and tactics in response to battlefield experience, but the pace and effectiveness of these adaptations varied significantly. American industrial capacity and systematic approach to tactical problem-solving enabled relatively rapid responses to identified deficiencies. The development and deployment of HVAP ammunition, though constrained by material scarcity, occurred within months of recognizing the inadequacy of earlier ammunition types. German responses to American tactical innovations were slower and less systematic, hampered by resource constraints, organizational rigidity, and the overwhelming pressure of fighting on multiple fronts against enemies who possessed growing material advantages. The crew-level experience of these tank battles deserves recognition beyond mere tactical analysis. Every engagement risked death or horrific injury for tankers on both sides. German Panther crews, despite their technical advantages, faced the constant possibility that an armor-penetrating round would turn their tank into a death trap. The interior of the Cité, a Panther struck by a penetrating hit, became an inferno of spalling armor fragments, igniting ammunition, and burning fuel. Survival often depended on split-second reactions and luck. American Sherman crews faced similar risks, compounded by their tanks' greater vulnerability and tendency to catch fire when penetrated. The knowledge that they were fighting from inferior vehicles required tremendous courage. When American tankers destroyed Panthers at long range using 76mm guns and HVAP ammunition, they were achieving victories that earlier in the war would have seemed impossible, overcoming both technical disadvantages and psychological barriers. The winter battles of 1944–45 ground down German armoured strength through relentless attrition. Panthers were destroyed by all manner of weapons, air attack, artillery, anti-tank guns, tank destroyers, and increasingly by 76mm Shermans that could engage them on more equal terms than before. Each loss was difficult to replace. German production struggled to keep pace with combat attrition, and the replacement crews arriving at the front were progressively less experienced and more poorly trained. By January 1945, many Panther battalions operated at half strength or less, cobbling together makeshift formations from surviving vehicles and replacement crews. The myth of German technical superiority, still propagated in some Wehrmacht training materials and tactical guidance, increasingly diverged from battlefield reality. American forces, conversely, grew stronger throughout this period. More 76mm Shermans reached frontline units, replacing earlier 75mm variants or supplementing existing formations. HVAP ammunition, though still scarce, became more widely distributed as production increased. Tank crews accumulated combat experience, developing the skills and confidence needed to employ their weapons effectively. The combined effect was an American armored force that by early 1945 could fight German heavy armor with reasonable confidence in favorable outcomes. The transformation wasn't complete or universal. Plenty of American units still struggled against German armor, and individual engagements still sometimes went badly for American crews. But the overall balance had shifted measurably from the dark days of Normandy, when Panthers seemed nearly invincible, to American tanks. The tactical lessons learned during this period influenced American armored doctrine beyond World War II. The importance of superior anti-tank ammunition became embedded in subsequent tank and ammunition development programs. The experience of fighting technically superior enemy armor with inferior vehicles, then gradually closing the capability gap through improved ammunition and tactics, informed Cold War planning for potential conflict against Soviet armor. The specific techniques developed for employing 76mm, Shermans against Panthers, careful positioning, patience in waiting for favorable shots, conservation of specialized ammunition became part of the body of knowledge passed down through training programs and tactical manuals. For German forces, the failure to adequately recognize and respond to improved American anti-tank capabilities represented a broader pattern of institutional dysfunction that characterized the Wehrmacht in the war's final years. Intelligence collection and analysis suffered from organizational fragmentation, resource scarcity, and the overwhelming pressure of fighting losing campaigns on multiple fronts. Tactical innovations that might have mitigated American advantages were either not developed, not disseminated, or impossible to implement, given Germany's deteriorating strategic situation. Panther crews continued fighting with skill and courage, but they did so within a system that could no longer provide them with the intelligence, support, and resources needed for success. The human dimension of these battles transcends tactical analysis and technological comparison. Young men from Germany and America found themselves locked in deadly combat, each trying to destroy the other before being destroyed themselves. The statistics of tanks destroyed and casualties inflicted represent individual tragedies, lives ended or forever altered, families devastated, futures erased. German tankers like Hauptmann Heinrich Kaufmann, who survived 4 Panther knockouts during the winter battles, carried psychological scars alongside physical injuries. American crews, like that of Sergeant Thomas Wade, whose Sherman was hit 3 times before finally being destroyed, experienced trauma that shaped the rest of their lives. The technological and tactical story of 76mm Shermans engaging Panthers at long range is also a story of human beings enduring unimaginable stress and danger. As the war moved into its final months, the tank battles continued with undiminished intensity, despite Germany's crumbling strategic position. Panthers remained dangerous opponents, when properly employed and adequately supplied, but these conditions became increasingly rare. American 76mm Shermans, now common throughout American armored formations, routinely engaged German armor at ranges that would have been considered suicidal earlier in the war. The German tankers, who had never expected American guns to threaten their Panthers at 1,200 yards, found themselves in a war transformed by technological adaptation and tactical evolution. Their assumptions, reasonable when formed, had become liabilities as American industry, and ingenuity closed the capability gap that had once seemed unbridgeable. The story of 76mm Shermans penetrating Panther armor at extreme ranges represents more than just technical achievement. It embodies the broader American approach to warfighting, identifying problems, developing solutions, producing and distributing those solutions at scale, and adapting tactics to exploit new capabilities. Where German forces emphasized individual technical excellence and tactical brilliance, American forces built systems that could sustain combat power through industrial production and organizational learning. Both approaches had strengths, but in World War II's industrial total war, the American system proved more resilient and ultimately more effective. The German Panther tank was a magnificent machine operated by skilled crews, but magnificence alone couldn't overcome the accumulated weight of American material, organizational, and tactical advantages. The battlefield is impartial, measuring only results, and by 1945 those results spoke with terrible clarity. American tanks that had once been hopelessly outmatched now fought as equals, and the German crews, who had never expected to be vulnerable at long range, learned through bitter experience that expectations and reality are not always aligned. In war's harsh calculus, that misalignment carried consequences measured in destroyed tanks and lost lives, a reminder that in combat, assumptions must be constantly tested against unforgiving reality. The crossing of the Rhine River in March 1945 marked a decisive phase where American armored superiority became unmistakable, built upon months of hard-won tactical refinements and technological improvements. The 76mm Sherman, once viewed skeptically by crews who remembered its troubled introduction, had evolved into a weapon that commanded respect from friend and foe alike. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano's company crossed the Rhine with the 9th Armored Division, their Shermans equipped with full loads of mixed ammunition including precious HVAP rounds. Romano had survived since Normandy, watching his unit transform from green recruits uncertain of their equipment into veterans who understood exactly what their tanks could accomplish. The confidence radiating from experienced American tank crews in early 1945 contrasted sharply with the desperation increasingly visible among German defenders. This wasn't arrogance, but earned assurance, forged through dozens of engagements where American tankers had proven they could stand against Germany's best armor and prevail. The German defense of the Reich's interior presented different challenges than the mobile warfare of France or the confined battles of the Ardennes. German forces now fought with the desperation of defenders protecting their homeland, employing every available weapon and tactic to delay the inevitable. Panther tanks, those that remained operational, were distributed in small groups to bolster defensive positions, conduct counterattacks, and contest key terrain. German commanders knew they couldn't win but fought to extract maximum cost from Allied advances, hoping perhaps that political solutions might emerge if military resistance lasted long enough. In this environment, individual tank duels took on heightened significance. Every destroyed Allied tank represented a small victory. Every successful defense of a town or river crossing bought a few more hours or days. German Panther crews fought with skill born of desperation, but they did so increasingly without fuel, ammunition, spare parts, or hope. The breakdown of German logistics by spring 1945 affected Panther operations as severely as any tactical disadvantage. Tanks, immobilized by mechanical failure, were abandoned for lack of spare parts. Combat damage that could have been repaired went unaddressed because repair facilities were destroyed or inaccessible. Fuel shortages, limited training for replacement crews, and constrained tactical movement. More than one Panther was lost not to enemy action but to simple abandonment when its fuel ran dry during withdrawal. American forces, meanwhile, operated with logistical abundance that would have seemed miraculous to their German opponents. Supply columns kept Sherman battalions fueled, armed, and maintained despite extended supply lines across occupied Germany. When American tanks were damaged, recovery vehicles towed them to repair facilities where they could be returned to service. The material asymmetry that had always favored the Allies reached its peak in the war's final months, creating conditions where German technical excellence in individual weapons systems became almost irrelevant against American systematic superiority. Lieutenant Richard Foster's experience during the drive toward Berlin illustrated how completely the tactical situation had evolved. His platoon of 76mm Shermans encountered a defensive position anchored by two Panthers near Kassel in early April 1945. The German tanks occupied carefully prepared positions with excellent fields of fire covering the approaches to a vital road junction. In 1944, such a position would have required extensive preparation to assault artillery bombardment, air support, flanking maneuvers by infantry. Foster instead deployed his platoon to covered positions at approximately 1,100 yards and engaged the Panthers with aimed fire using HVAP, ammunition. His gunners, veterans of months of combat, estimated range accurately and placed their shots with precision. Within minutes, Both Panthers were burning. The engagement cost Foster's platoon nothing but ammunition. German survivors later reported that they had never expected American tanks to engage them effectively at such range, despite intelligence warnings that should have reached frontline units months earlier. The gap between German battlefield intelligence and frontline awareness remained a critical vulnerability that American forces exploited repeatedly. The psychological collapse of German resistance manifested differently across various Wehrmacht units, but among Panther crews there emerged a fatalistic recognition that technical superiority no longer guaranteed survival. Young replacements arriving at Panther battalions in March and April 1945 encountered veteran crews who spoke openly of American capabilities with respect bordering on fear. The mythology that had sustained German armored forces, belief in superior training, equipment, and fighting spirit, had eroded under the weight of accumulated defeats and material shortages. Some crews continued fighting with fanatical determination, driven by Nazi ideology or simple devotion to duty. Others sought opportunities to surrender once it became clear that their position was hopeless. The heterogeneity of German responses complicated American tactical planning, but ultimately mattered little to the final outcome. Whether German tankers fought to the death or surrendered, the result was the same. American armor advanced, German resistance crumbled, and the Reich's final days approached. The individual stories of German Panther crews during this terminal phase deserve recognition as human tragedies within the larger catastrophe. Oberleutnant Franz Weber commanded a Panther in the defense of the Ruhr Pocket, fighting a series of delaying actions as American forces methodically reduced the Prepok encirclement. Weber's diary, recovered after the war, documented his growing despair as his battalion was ground down through attrition. He described engagements where American tanks destroyed Panthers from ranges. His crew thought themselves safe, noted the declining quality of replacement personnel, and recorded the progressive breakdown of supply and communication. Weber survived the war and spent years in Allied captivity, his tank destroyed by a 76mm, Sherman firing HVAP at what he estimated was 1,300 yards. His story, multiplied across thousands of German tankers, represents the human cost of technological miscalculation and strategic defeat. These were men fighting for a cause already lost, dying in machines that could no longer protect them, victims of their leadership's delusions and their own military effectiveness, prolonging a hopeless struggle. American tankers, too, continued dying in the war's final weeks despite their growing advantages. Technical superiority and tactical confidence couldn't eliminate the risks inherent in armored combat. German anti-tank weapons remained deadly. Panzerfausts in the hands of infantry, 88mm anti-tank guns in prepared positions, and the remaining Panthers still capable of destroying Shermans if they achieved first shot. Corporal James Mitchell's Sherman was knocked out by a Panther near Leipzig in mid-April 1945, the German tank firing from ambush at close range where armor advantages mattered little. Mitchell survived but lost 2 crew members, killed instantly when the armor-piercing round penetrated their tank's thin side armor. The randomness of survival and death in combat, one man living while another died for no reason beyond chance and geometry, haunted Mitchell for the rest of his life. Victory offered no consolation to those who paid the highest price for it, no meaning that could restore what was taken. The final documented long-range engagement between a 76mm Sherman and a Panther occurred on April 28, 1945, near Rosenheim in southern Germany. A Sherman commanded by Sergeant Albert Hayes encountered a solitary Panther defending a bridge. The German tank was positioned to cover the crossing, its crew apparently determined to prevent American forces from using the intact span. Hayes's tank engaged from approximately 1,000 yards, firing 3 HVAP rounds. The first shot missed. The second struck the Panther's frontal armor without penetrating, but the third round found the junction between turret and hull, achieving a catastrophic kill. The German crew never emerged from the burning vehicle. Hayes later reflected on the engagement with neither satisfaction nor triumph, only weary relief that he and his crew had survived another encounter. The tactical significance of destroying one Panther in the war's final days approached zero. Germany was already defeated, victory assured. Yet for Hayes and his crew, and for the German tankers who died in that Panther, the engagement was absolutely significant. The difference between life and death, survival and annihilation. The statistical accounting of tank losses during the final campaign in Germany reveals the extent to which American anti-tank capabilities had evolved. Analysis of German Panther losses from January through May, 1,945, shows that an increasing percentage were destroyed by American tank fire rather than by artillery, air attack, or abandonment. The 76mm Sherman, once unable to threaten Panthers except under favorable circumstances, had become a reliable Panther killer when employed by experienced crews with proper ammunition. This transformation occurred without fundamental changes to the Sherman's design or the Panther's armor scheme. What changed was ammunition technology, crew training, tactical doctrine, and accumulated experience. The American military system had identified a problem, developed solutions, and implemented those solutions effectively enough to alter combat outcomes measurably. The contrast with German institutional sclerosis couldn't have been sharper. The immediate post-war period saw extensive analysis of armored combat effectiveness as American military planners sought to extract lessons for future conflicts. The 76mm Sherman's performance against German heavy armor received particular attention. Reports noted that while the Sherman remained inferior to the Panther in armor protection and slightly inferior in gun performance with standard ammunition, the availability of HVAP ammunition and superior American training and logistics created overall effectiveness that exceeded German capabilities by war's end. These analyses influenced subsequent American tank development, leading to vehicles like the M26 Pershing and eventually the M46 Patton, which incorporated lessons learned about the importance of gun performance and crew survivability. The German approach to tank design emphasizing armor, protection, and gun power, sometimes at the expense of reliability and ease of production, was recognized as having produced excellent individual tanks poorly suited to the industrial total war that World War II had become. German prisoners of war, interviewed extensively by Allied intelligence services, provided valuable insights into how Wehrmacht forces perceived American tank capabilities throughout the conflict. Many Panther crewmen expressed surprise at the 76mm Sherman's performance, particularly with HVAP ammunition, which several described as unexpectedly effective. Some German tankers admitted they had continued operating under outdated assessments of American capabilities well into 1945. Their tactical assumptions, shaped by experiences from earlier in the war. Others noted that even when intelligence reports warned of improved American anti-tank performance, the information often failed to translate into modified tactics or training. The institutional barriers to learning and adaptation within the Wehrmacht by 1945 meant that frontline units continued repeating tactical errors even when information existed that should have prompted changes. This organizational failure multiplied the human cost of Germany's military defeat, condemning soldiers to die from avoidable mistakes. The broader strategic implications of the 76mm Sherman's evolution extend beyond World War II's tactical battles. The success of American ammunition development and rapid fielding demonstrated the advantages of systematic approaches to military problem-solving. The United States military-industrial complex, for all its inefficiencies and bureaucratic complexities, proved capable of identifying deficiencies, developing solutions, and implementing those solutions at scale within operationally relevant timeframes. This capability would define American military power throughout the Cold War and beyond. The specific story of HVAP ammunition, from recognition of inadequate performance through development and production to battlefield employment, became a template for subsequent weapons development programs. The institutional mechanisms that made this success possible represented strategic advantages as significant as any weapon system. For the German Panther crews, who never expected 76mm Shermans to threaten them at 1,200 yards, the war's final months brought costly education in the dangers of static assumptions and institutional complacency. Their technical confidence, justified by the Panther's genuine strengths, had created vulnerabilities when American capabilities evolved beyond German intelligence estimates. The human cost of this miscalculation was measured in destroyed tanks, killed crews, and strategic defeat. But the broader lesson transcended the specific technologies involved. In warfare, as in all competitive human endeavors, those who fail to recognize and adapt to changing conditions do so at mortal risk. The Wehrmacht's inability to systematically track and respond to American tactical and technological evolution represented an institutional failure with strategic consequences. Individual German soldiers and tankers often demonstrated remarkable skill and courage, but they operated within a system that by 1945 could no longer support their efforts with the intelligence, materiel, and leadership necessary for success. The human legacy of these battles lived on in the veterans who survived. American tankers carried memories of terror and triumph, of friends lost and enemies killed, of machines that proved more capable than anyone expected. German veterans bore the weight of defeat alongside their combat memories, struggling in post-war years to reconcile their service to an evil regime with their personal experiences of comradeship and sacrifice. The specific tactical details, penetration values, engagement ranges, ammunition types, faded in importance compared to the fundamental human experiences of combat, yet those tactical details mattered enormously to the young men who lived or died, based on whether their tank's armor could withstand an incoming round, or their gun could penetrate an enemy's protection. Technology shaped human fate in immediate and absolute ways, making the technical story inseparable from the human one. The 76mm Sherman's journey from inadequate stopgap to capable Panther killer embodies themes that resonate beyond World War II's battlefields. It speaks to the power of incremental improvement, the importance of institutional learning, and the military value of logistical and industrial strength. It demonstrates that technical inferiority in individual systems can be overcome through superior ammunition, better training, sound tactics, and overwhelming material support. Most fundamentally, it reminds us that warfare is a contest, not just between technologies, but between entire societies, their industrial capacities, organizational effectiveness, ability to learn and adapt, and will to sustain costly efforts toward victory. The American system, for all its flaws, proved superior to the German system in these decisive dimensions. The soldiers and tankers who fought the war experienced these abstract strategic realities as concrete life and death struggles, giving human meaning to historical outcomes. The final accounting cannot be rendered purely in tactical terms. Yes, 76mm, Shermans learned to kill Panthers at ranges, German crews thought safe. Yes, American ammunition development and crew training closed capability gaps that had once seemed unbridgeable. Yes, the United States military demonstrated organizational learning and industrial power that Germany couldn't match. But these facts encompass thousands of individual human stories, lives cut short, futures erased, families shattered. The German tanker who died in a burning Panther near Rosenheim in April 1945 was someone's son, perhaps someone's husband or father, a human being with hopes and dreams extinguished by an HVAP, round fired from 1,000 yards away. The American crews who destroyed those Panthers carried their own burdens, memories of killing that would haunt some for the rest of their lives. War's necessity doesn't erase its tragedy, and historical analysis shouldn't obscure the human cost of military operations. The legacy of these battles shapes our understanding of armored warfare and military adaptation. Every tank design since World War II has reflected lessons learned about the balance between protection, firepower, and mobility. Every military organization has studied the American success in rapidly developing and fielding improved ammunition as an example of effective weapons development. The specific story of 76mm Shermans and Panther tanks has become part of military education, teaching new generations about the importance of intelligence, adaptation, and systematic approaches to capability development. But perhaps the most important lesson is simpler and more human, that assumptions are dangerous in warfare, that enemies adapt and allies improve, and that yesterday's advantages can become tomorrow's liabilities. The German tankers who confidently believed themselves safe at 1,000 200 yards, learned this lesson too late. Their story, and that of the American crews who taught it to them, remains relevant wherever human beings prepare for combat, a reminder that in war, complacency kills and adaptation survives. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.